This Friday, see what critics are calling a cold-blooded masterpiece.
Hello, Finney.
You're dead.
Dead is just a word. Did you think our story was over?
Discover the secret
You brought us here for a reason.
behind the mask.
What do you think happens when you die? It's time to find out.
Ethan Hawke,
I'm not afraid of you.
You should be.
Black Phone 2, only in theaters Friday. Rated R, under 17, not admitted without parent.
The family that vacations together stays together. At least, that was the plan. Except now, the dastardly desk clerk is saying he can't confirm your connecting rooms.
Wait, what?
That's right, ma'am. You have rooms 201 and 709.
No, we cannot be 5 floors away from our kids.
The doors have double locks. They'll be fine.
When you want connecting rooms confirmed before you arrive, it matters where you stay.
Welcome to Hilton. I see your connecting rooms are already confirmed.
Hilton, for this day.
Wish you could become a morning person? You know the type, up before the sun, early morning runs, first one to the office with donuts and a smile. How do they do it? Easy. With the new Galaxy Watch 8, sleep tracking and personalized insights from Samsung Health help you improve so you can wake up to a whole new you. One who, dare I say it, skips the snooze? It's possible. Train your sleep with Galaxy Watch 8. Learn more at Samsung.com. Requires compatible Samsung Galaxy phone, Samsung Health app, and Samsung account.
Finished training for the day? Time to fight post-workout fatigue with Core Power Protein Shakes. They're packed with 26 grams of high-quality protein to build muscle and electrolytes to help hydrate. The nutrition you need to help your body replenish, rebuild, and repair post-workout so you can power on to the next one. Champion your recovery with Core Power. Visit corepower.com to learn more.
Hey, Fidelity. How can I remember to invest every month?
With the Fidelity app, you can choose a schedule and set up recurring investments in stocks and ETFs.
Oh, that sounds easier than I thought.
You got this.
Yeah, I do. Now, where did I put my keys?
You will find them where you left them.
Investing involves risk, including risk of loss. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC, member NYSE, SIPC.
Hey all you heroes, hawks, heralds, crows, pirates, and wardens. Welcome to the Dragon Age Lorecast, where we unpack, discuss, and galaxy brain about all the lore behind the Dragon Age series.
We are so excited to bring you this podcast. Every episode, we'll be talking about a different topic in the Dragon Age universe, from character deep dives to exalted marches and elven gods. We will cover it all.
There will be spoilers. And always remember, swooping is bad.
Hello and welcome to the Dragon Age Lorecast, where we talk about Dragon Age and its lore. And I remember that I am the one who opens this podcast. I am your host, Austin, your co-host, Austin, also known as Teacup, and I'm here with my other co-host.
That's me. We're feeling frisky tonight. Apparently, I am Shelby or She-Cup, and I'm excited to be here.
Who else would you be?
Austin.
Yeah, so we're here for another character deep dive, but before we jump in, it's not just the two of us tonight, is it?
It's not.
No, it is not.
Yes, we have a guest with us, and I'll let Shelby introduce our guest.
Yeah, so our guest is C.W. Rogers, also known as Charles, from our patron chats. Welcome.
Hello. I am very excited to be here. I was absolutely delighted when the Cups were like, do you want to come on and talk in this episode? So I'm really, really looking forward to talking about this topic, because I have a slightly controversial take on this particular topic.
So,
which is, I like this character a lot.
I do have a story that I don't think I've ever told you, but I actually, when you became a patron, I know exactly who you were because I had seen you on TikTok talking about Dragon Age.
Oh, yeah, I did. what Austin is talking about is that I used to do, I was doing like a chronological run through. I have like a chronological order guide, but I used to make a lot of Dragon Age TikToks. And I stopped because TikTok sucks as a platform. And then I got so busy. We'll go over my laundry list of things I do with my time at the end of the episode, but I got so busy I never came back to it. But yeah, I got some heat on TikTok over this particular character before. So that has happened.
So yeah, I actually knew you from TikTok, and I said, I remember because I said to Shelby, I said, oh, we should get him on because we need more male guests on Dragon Age who know the lore and stuff. And so that was just a little fun kind of thing that happened. But yeah, so we're here to talk about character deep dive. We're here to talk about a pretty controversial character, and a controversial character in probably a very different way. Like, we've obviously, like, Solus is a controversial character, Loghain is a controversial character for a lot of reasons, but in my experience, this character gets so much hate more than love. Like, with Loghain, I see like probably what I would call like a 60-40 split of 60 hate, 40 like. With our character Carver today, I probably see like an 80-20, 90-10.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen anybody really like going like to bat for Carver. Like, I've seen people say, I don't mind him, he's not that bad, but I don't think I've ever seen anybody talk about how much they actually love Carver. I think he definitely classifies with Oghren.
The Carver Hawke Defender community, as far as I am aware, is me and my friend Ollie.
Okay.
So these are the people that I know that when we get into conversations, it's the two of us that are like, actually.
Okay.
Let me jump in here.
I don't know if you ever... Lewis, who used to be a patron with us, used to be the Nud King. He is a Carver Defender. So there's three. Hell
yeah.
There's three.
Oh, yeah. There are more of us than they think.
Let's just dive right in. I personally am excited to talk about this because I started out in this research, and this happens to me a lot. This has happened quite often. I started out in this research hating this character, and now after I've made the show notes, I feel like I have a lot more empathy for him as a character. So let's just dive right in with the fun facts. First off, he's written by Lucas Christensen. And surprisingly, maybe to some of you, which we did mention this on our Bethany deep dive, Carver is twin A. He is the elder twin, which I think makes sense because I think that he has very large middle child vibes. He also has a tattoo of a Mabari that he can make bark. I assume it's like a bicep tattoo that when he flexes, it moves its mouth. We don't really know for certain, but that's my assumption at least.
I mean, his glorious arms are very exposed.
That's true.
And it's not on them. So we're not quite sure where this Mabari tattoo actually is.
It could be on his ass, but it also could be like the underside of his arm. And so it's just not seen.
That is also true. I always interpreted it as like being on his lower back somewhere. Like somewhere where you get drunk, because he is a soldier. Somewhere where you get drunk with your buddies and you get a tattoo and it's funny and like you have to kind of hide it in your uniform.
Are you saying that he has a Mabari tramp stamp?
I am absolutely saying that Carver Hawke has a Mabari tramp stamp, and I know Dragon Age lore really well, so you can trust me. Don't fact check this. I'm correct.
All right. So my last fun fact is that Carver has a lot of dialogue and banter references to their time in Lothering and Ferelden in general. For example, if you take Carver to talk to the Arishok, he will sometimes say, quote, "We only had one Qunari in Lothering, but that was enough," end quote, referring to Sten in Dragon Age Origins, which I find it's humorous to talk shit about the Qunari while you are in the midst of a hostile camp of them. But Carver is nothing. That man is gonna talk his shit. Let's make that real clear.
Yeah. I feel like both of the Hawke twins have terrible survival instincts. I mean, obviously, but
yeah, different types of terrible survival instincts, but both of them kind of they would have been a very, very good pair if they had been a pair. Because I think Carver's natural, like, distrust and bristling towards other people would have been offset by Bethany. And vice versa. I think some of the stumbling blocks that Bethany has would have been offset by Carver. Unfortunately, one of them fucking dies at the start of the game.
I do want to go back to this because I agree with you that like they are so different and they complement, like they're the opposite. They juxtapose because Carver's natural inclination is to negativity and mistrust, whereas Bethany's natural inclination is to positivity. And like she has this more positive outlook on humanity and people in general. Like, yes, she has the mage secrecy stuff, but like she is much more of a positive character than he is. And I think that's an interesting juxtaposition, and I wish we got more of it, but alas. All right, so let's get into his background and his time before Dragon Age 2. So he was named after a Templar named Sir Marivar Carver, who was instrumental in hiding the blossoming love affair between Malcolm Hawke and Leandra Amell. He helped them escape Kirkwall and flee to Ferelden and like basically helped them set up their new life together. And so the Hawks named their firstborn son after him in honor. And the Templar's name actually means skill thoughtfully applied, and he was an excellent swordsman. And so Carver, he has like kind of conversations with Hawke about this because they find out about it in game after doing the quests at the estate. And so they find out about this, and Carver kind of like looks up to him almost and wants to live up to his namesake.
I want to pause like here just in like kind of jump. I know we're jumping timeline, but like to kind of like talk about like a little bit on the Carver hate side here. You learned the wrong lesson from this story, kid.
Say more about what you mean.
He hears this story and looks up to this man, this Templar, and says, "Oh, I'm going to go be a Templar," rather than taking the fact of this guy broke what would have been his Templar like vows or whatever, like his goal and his purpose to honor the people that are there. And so I just feel like sometimes I look at this and I'm like, you learned the wrong lesson, bro. Come on.
Is that the lesson, or is the lesson that you don't sacrifice your inherent sense of morality when you become a Templar in the way that it appears externally to somebody who is living around apostates? That
Listen,
there is more diversity of thought in the Templars.
Can I not just have a counterpoint without like...
No, we have to moralize about it. I do agree with Charles, because like at the end of the day, even if he joins the Templars, like you can still get him to side with you at the end. So like,
True.
yeah, he did learn the lesson. He is gonna break with what the Templars say and side with his sibling instead. So I kind of think he did learn the lesson.
I'll also add, is that not Cullen's entire character arc that we praise him for doing?
Well, some of us do criticize Cullen's character arc. Just saying, I think it could be better.
I'm just saying, fandom as a whole, is that not what Cullen did? Did we all forget that he wanted to wipe out everybody in the Ferelden Circle just because he got hot in Dragon Age Inquisition?
I mean, to be fair,
but that's
Cullen
a hell
is
of a blow
traumatized.
up, though.
He is traumatized, and I will speak to that with Carver in a little bit. So I'm just going to move us right along, because he is born in 9/11 Dragon, and we actually don't know pretty much anything about his childhood, because what we do know about his time before Dragon Age 2 is focused on his military service, and this is where we're going to get into the trauma. So after Malcolm dies, Carver joins the army of Ferelden, where he ends up fighting in the Battle of Ostagar, which is where he served under the, quote, 3rd Company under Captain Varel, according to Aveline. I wondered if this Varel is the same Varel as Seneschal Varel from Awakening. I dug into spent way too long tangenting on this and could not find an answer. So if you are listening out there and you know the answer to that, please leave us a comment I think it may be left ambiguous, but anyway. So Carver is an excellent fighter in the army. His fellow soldiers even created a maneuver based on him and his fighting style where Carver is like the sole attacker. Like he strikes out and all of his company defends his flank. So that is really important to highlight, that Carver is a really good soldier and he sees action in the Battle of Ostagar. And when Loghain retreats and betrays the Wardens, Carver actually continues fighting and had to be drug off the battlefield. He then returned to his family and fled when the Darkspawn came to Lothering. So I want to pause us here and emphasize like just how serious I think this is, because this man had to be drug off the battlefield in a losing battle after he had been betrayed by his commander. That is trauma. Like that he has PTSD. Like he just has to. There's no way he doesn't. I can't imagine the guilt he probably has. So for me, when I was doing this research about, I knew he was a veteran of the war, but I didn't realize like, oh, he saw action, all of the that he was a good fighter. And so I think that is a really significant part of Carver's character that is very often overlooked or just not mentioned.
When I'm having discussions with people about the character of Carver Hawke, this is one of the things I think is the most overlooked, that he was a veteran of Ostagar. And I think it's because the prologue moves so quickly, and we also get Aveline as well, and Sir Wesley, that Carver's role in the battle gets completely glossed over. And yeah, Shelby, I think you're exactly right. He's traumatized from that. It's an incredibly traumatizing battle. Basically, everyone we've seen who survived it is carrying some sort of trauma to varying degrees. When Sir Aaron Hawthorne, all these people we see who actually lived through Ostagar are really messed up from it. And then the other salient point with this, if you didn't do the math like I did, Dragon Age Origins takes place in 930 Dragon. Carver's 19. He is a teenager. He has been in the army, we don't know how long, maybe since he was about 16 or 17, but he's been in the army. The latter half of his teenage years were spent in the army, and then he's 19. Everybody dies in front of him in this horrific battle. He has to run home to watch his home get destroyed and watch his twin die in front of him. That's gonna mess you up regardless of who you are, but especially if you're a teenage boy, like he is in the prologue.
And I think this is like a failure. It's not really a failure of the character, in my opinion. It's more of a failure of Dragon Age 2's development, and Dragon Age 2's writing. Result of this is like, we do not get to see or talk about the twins' grief. Whether it's Bethany or whether it's Carver, like and I think this is part of like to foreshadow a later point, is neither sibling gets to really grieve their sibling because their grief is overshadowed by Leandra's. Carver would probably garner some more sympathy if we could have seen him grieve his sister.
Yeah, and also Carver really is trying throughout the prologue and throughout sort of the arrival at Kirkwall, trying to put on a brave face, because you can still kind of tell he's in soldier mode. He's in sort of get from point A to point B. We're still trying to get there. He's treating everything with hostility because that's who he is. It's a trauma response. But he is still very much in that mode. And then we skip ahead to a year later, and we have to infer part of the issue with Dragon Age 2's sort of jumping year to year to year. We really have to infer what happened in the in-between years to see where he gets to in Act 1, where we spend the most time with him, but also where people have the most criticisms of him, is in that 1 year after Ostagar. And yeah, I think you're right. I think that really comes down to how Dragon Age 2 is written versus anything with the character himself.
And I think like Carver as a character, at least my opinions, before we get into this, in his defense, I will say this. Carver blames and attacks what he thinks he can attack, which is Hawke.
Right. Like he can't attack the systems of the world that have impacted him. He has to attack his sibling, like the person that is supposed to be there for him no matter what. He's going to attack them because they're going to be there for him no matter what. It's just like kind of the reason why when your boss is being really shitty, you come home and you take it out on your spouse. Like people do that all the time. Like, yeah, it's not a good thing to do, but it is understandable because you're taking it out on the people that you can. And yeah, I mean, I don't want the listeners to think I'm encouraging you to go home and yell at your spouse. Like, please don't do that. But when we look at this in context, I think it can make sense. But I do want to move on to the prologue since we've mentioned it already. Because you do meet Carver regardless of your player choice. If you're playing a Mage Hawke, Bethany will die and Carver will survive the prologue, accompanying you to Kirkwall. And so, as is with the other choice, if Bethany lives, he spends a year with you in Kirkwall, working with your player character to repay your passage to Kirkwall. And then that's when you hear about Varric and Bartrand's expedition to the Deep Roads. And this is where it kind of starts diverging from the Bethany story. Because pretty early on, whereas Bethany expresses doubt and anxiety, Carver expresses bitterness and negativity. He talks about how he doesn't feel any connection to Kirkwall and how he believes Leandra's just trying to force her past on the family, and he resents his older sibling, especially claiming that he hates having to live in Hawke's shadow and that he's obligated to protect Hawke because they are a mage. This is so different from Bethany's feelings of unrelenting guilt for being the mage that has to be protected. And so I think it's an interesting juxtaposition of their characters. It's similar, like the same points are being hit, of mages are mistreated in this world, but we're getting it from a completely different perspective. But it's also notable because I think that there are a lot of people out there who think, oh, Carver just hates mages and he hates his family and that's why he wants to go join the Templars. And I don't think that's accurate because in the prologue, he does not fear magic. He doesn't even have a particular affinity for the Templars. Like, he's not rah pro-Templar out there defending Meredith. He's not. In fact, at the end of the game, he even calls Meredith a bitch. So, like, he's not this pro-Templar guy that people sometimes think he is. However, he sees the prevalence of blood magic in Kirkwall, which, fair, it's everywhere. And he changes his mind and realizes, like, hey, okay, yeah, the Templars might be necessary. Magic can be pretty dangerous. And so that's Carver's journey in the prologue. I'll pause here for thoughts before we get into the two big decisions.
I think we underestimate sometimes, like with Carver's own thing, that like the Hawke sibling, the twin, whichever Hawke twin, does have pretty robust conversations with Fenris. Like, Fenris's comments about Bethany show that, and I think it comes in with Carver. And I think that as flawed as I think Carver is, I do think he has a strong sense of justice. And I don't think he could hear Fenris's story. And the person who stays behind and fights beside his comrades, even when his commander has left, is not a person who hears Fenris' story and says, okay, mages can be unchecked.
Yeah, with regards to the prologue in Act 1, something that was brought up for me recently that I wasn't able to put into words, but I am able to put into words now, is the idea of the medium in which the story is being told. That I think part of a lot of the negative reaction to the things Carver does in Act 1, particularly the relationship between Carver and Hawke, comes from the fact that Hawke is the player character. That it's not just that Hawke is the protagonist of the story, but that the player actually has agency to control and shape their Hawke. And when Carver is yelling at Hawke and he's saying these very bitter, hurt things to Hawke, I think people feel that a little more deeply, also because they are in control of Hawke. But looking at this relationship, removing the player aspect of it and looking at the relationship, while I'm not going to necessarily defend everything that Carver says to Hawke over the course of the first act, it is important to keep in mind, to me, this is a kid who just survived Ostagar. He's now 20, so he's an adult, a full adult, who really nobody seems to take seriously throughout Act 1. If you look at the companion banter, they're all basically shitting on him the whole time. Everybody's calling him the inferior Hawke. The people that recruit you, to work for them, basically say that they'll take Carver as a package deal, which, remember, this is an Ostagar survivor. And not like a marched off with Logain, but like a had to be dragged off the field Ostagar survivor. So to go from surviving that at 19, surviving Lothering, getting across the country, and getting in just to be told, your sibling can shoot fire out of their fingers. So, we really rather have them. That's going to sting, particularly for somebody who doesn't seem like he ever really felt like he had a place outside of the army. And now he's lost that. Mm-hmm. We don't know how many people died that were in his company, but he had to have seen one of the only things he had of his own taken away from him. And I do think one more point I want to make on that same line is someone, I think it was Capricorn Tower, and I were chatting about it. So I want to give credit where credit is due. I think this was you. If it was not Capricorn Tower, please let me know. Brought up the point that we never really get to see Carver outside of the context of Bethany's dead. So we were having a discussion on whether or not Carver would be a different character, depending on whether or not Hawke was a mage. Because if Hawke is a mage, there are now 3 mages in this family, as opposed to 2 mages in the family where it's Malcolm, Hawke, and Bethany, and they're kind of off doing their own thing. And maybe Carver has a better relationship with a sibling who's more quote unquote normal versus a Carver who both his siblings are different than him. He is the different one in the family. He is different from his father. He is different from his siblings. His relationship with Leandra, I assume you're saving that for later. But that also is something that rings out to me with the way he acts over Act 1, is it's just been a constant year of, once again, he is still being treated as different. He is still being treated as almost kind of lesser.
Yeah, and I think
younger and the non-mage.
I think it would be super difficult to deal with. And I frankly would be offended if my sibling who stayed at home during a war, we moved to another country as refugees and everybody is heralding them as this great champion, as this great fighter. And you're like, well, I'm the only one who's actually seen fucking battle. I would be pissed. So I get that.
If people call him a younger brother, like having younger brother syndrome, which he is, he's the younger brother. But there are also, to me, reasons for why he says the things he says beyond just, oh, he feels inferior to his older sibling. Like there's more happening with this specific relationship. And I really wish that we had seen more of their relationship prior. And I also think it's interesting to juxtapose it with like the DLC relationships if you play them in Act 3. And the way that I always play the 2 DLCs in Act 3, particularly if the Hawke sibling is still alive in Act 3, because that's some of the only content we get, but we can also see that relationship changes.
Yeah.
You get different dialogue from them if you're playing it later on, and I think it's interesting to see how those relationships evolve over time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's get into Acts 2 and 3. And so I'm going to split this up like we did in the Bethany episode. And I'm just going to go through what happens when he becomes a Grey Warden versus what happens when he becomes a Templar. And we're going to talk about the Templar first, and then we'll do our mid-break. So let's dive right in. He willingly, I do want to emphasize that he's not conscripted into the Templars. He does join them willingly, because he thinks that it's his one chance to prove himself and escape out from under Hawke's shadow. Which, to put it in perspective, this is the one organization that his older sibling cannot join.
Mm-hmm.
So I get it. Like, yes, it's shitty that you are basically like betraying your sibling and, you know, like potentially bringing more scrutiny on your mage sibling that's an apostate. But I don't think he thinks about that. I think he's thinking about, how can I differentiate myself from my family? This is the only thing that my sibling can't take from me, and I'm going to go do it.
I also think that it is a salient point that the way you trigger this particular path to Carver is after he spends the entire Act 1 being like, we're going together, right? We are going together to the Deep Roads. It's going to be the Hawke siblings. I am at least going to be equal to my sibling. For at the end of the act, Hawke to turn to Carver and say, actually, no, stay home.
Yeah.
You are basically telling Carver, or at least confirming for Carver, what he feels, which is his sibling does not view him even as an equal.
Mm.
And whatever,
his mommy told him to.
His mommy told him to, and Hawke values what his mommy says over what he wants. And so, yeah,
Leandra, she's such a boy mom. I can't. Okay. But I think that this speaks to how resentful he is, right? Like, he is so upset about being left behind. I think Bethany doesn't care as much about being left behind as Carver does. She's more like, okay, like, that's a little annoying. Like, I'm sad to be alone, but like, ultimately she's fine. And like, she moves on way quicker than he does, I think, because he is so mad. And he does, though, when you come back, he promises like, hey, I'm not going to reveal that you're a mage. Like, I'm not that evil, basically. And he does have some appearances throughout the game as a Templar. He'll appear next to Knight Commander Meredith, leading an army during the Cunari siege. And as hostilities between mages and Templars increase, he does get kidnapped by Grace and Thrask, who are inciting a rebellion to overthrow Meredith, believing that the champion is working for her, regardless of their allegiances in this struggle. But in Act 3, Carver obviously is naturally going to support the Templars in their efforts to annul the Circle of Magi. In a last attempt to make Hawke join the Templars and side with him, he asks if the champion will fight their brother, which gives Hawke the option of responding that, well, Carver, you've been itching to fight me for a long time. And you know, they can have that kind of back and forth of like, you guys have been antagonistic this whole game. Like, here's the culmination of that. But Carver eventually responds by saying, that's not what I want. And will start expressing doubts about the Templars. And Meredith will end up reminding him of his duty, whatever, but you can get him to side with you. And so I think that is significant. I think that, it shows that he's not just, again, gung-ho for the Templars. But if Hawke does side with the Templars, Carver ends up expressing surprise that it's the Templar Order that brings the siblings together. And when the champion goes to confront Meredith, Hawke flat out says like, hey, I'm not going to murder my sibling for you, Meredith. Like, I'm just not going to do it. And so I think that these are moments where we see his real character shine through, where he does care about his sibling. Deep down, he cares deeply for Hawke. It's just a classic sibling relationship that's antagonistic, where, yeah, you give each other a lot of shit and you say things that you end up regretting later. But at the end of the day, he does not despise Hawke, and he does not abandon all principles when he joins the Templars.
I would like to highlight, because this was the bit I came the most prepared for. I would like to highlight some of the most common criticisms of Carver. This is easily one of my more I'm going to defend him moments. Some of the ones I hear the most are that he betrays his older sibling, which Shelby has pointed out. No, he doesn't. He will not reveal that Hawke is a mage, no matter how he is feeling. He's going to continue. But I've also heard, it's a betrayal of the memory of Bethany for him to join the Templars. Bethany was not necessarily like anti-circle or anti-chantry.
No, in fact, she's pro-chantry.
Yeah, she's very pro-chantry. This is not like turning his back on the memory of Bethany for him to turn around and do this. She honestly, knowing her character, might have even supported it.
Bethany is in the same line of thought that Vivian is when it comes to magic.
A little bit less extreme, I would say.
But like in the same kind of thing of like a mage has a responsibility to control their power because their power is dangerous. Bethany has an understanding that I think that she inherits from Malcolm Hawke, because I think he had an understanding of that as an apostate. Obviously, like, he didn't want to be bound to the circle, probably because he would have been bound to the Kirkwall circle.
Well, and he couldn't have gotten married to Leandra.
Exactly. But I do think that I agree with you. I don't think he really betrays the sibling. As much as I find Carver annoying a lot of the times, I do like him joining the Templars versus the Wardens. Whereas I prefer to send Bethany to the Wardens.
That sounds like something we can break down at the end of this episode.
The other one I hear is that Carver became a magic cop, like assigning the institutional sins of the Templars onto this 20-year-old recruit who's joining them. To which my response is exactly what Shelby said earlier. Consider he lives in Kirkwall. And if you've lived in Kirkwall for a year, you've seen the weird blood magic stuff that happens in Act 1. If you're not already in, and also Meredith has not gone crazy yet, and he wasn't there, the Hawks weren't there for the entire thing where Meredith, like, basically ousted the previous Viscount and installed a new Viscount. He wasn't there for all that. So if you're looking at it from his perspective, yeah, it makes sense that the Templars are not going to be this great institutional evil in the same way that we as the viewer or the player might look at it from an outside point of view.
Right.
So I don't necessarily think he knew a lot of that or considered a lot of it. All he saw was, I just spent the last year running around watching a bunch of blood mages do insane stuff. There's an abomination standing next to me. Is no one going to talk about the fact that there is an abomination standing next to me and we're not going to do anything about it? No? Okay. Maybe we actually do need some Templars. And I will also hasten to point out, he tried to join the Guard and Aveline told him no.
True.
So he tried other options to get away from Hawke and chart his own course. He didn't really have any left at this point.
No, that's exactly true. And yeah, I just think that we have to remember that Carver, we're omnipotent in the series. Like, we know exactly time and time again how Templars behave badly and oppress mages. We know that. We know what happens at the Circle in Ferelden. We know what happens at Taventer. Like, we know about all this stuff. Carver knows Lothering and Kirkwall. He knows a small town where nothing ever happens, where the most exciting thing that ever happened is that the Blight came through and destroyed it. And he knows Kirkwall, one of the most blood magic ridden cities that exists in Thedas. So yeah, of course he's gonna think, the Templars, they're a necessary thing. Let me go help out. I think it makes perfect sense.
one of the frustrations that I constantly run into when talking about the Dragon Age series is that while the Dragon Age series does address a lot of the same core institutional problems that we see throughout real history and throughout our current events and, throughout the history of religion and government, you do kind of have to divorce that from the context of the characters themselves. They're not necessarily going to have the same moral system as we would directly apply to our world. So something like Carver joining the Templars, you have to look at it through a slightly different lens, I think, in order to really understand why that choice makes sense to him in the context of the character and how the characters internally within the context of the Dragon Age universe might feel about the Templars versus how we might feel about them as the player and what we've experienced through Origins and Awakening and all of the tie-in media by the time we get up to Dragon Age 2.
Yeah, and I mean, I've said this on the podcast before that, like, yes, there are similarities between the Templars and cops, law enforcement. There's similarities between the Chantry and Catholicism. Like, we've talked about that, but it's not a one-to-one comparison. The Chantry does not equal Catholicism. Like, there are some significant differences, and so we have to keep that in mind when we analyze these characters. But just in the sake of time, I want to move us to the mid-break, so I'm going to turn it over to Austin.
Big news. Sephora is now on Uber Eats. So if you find yourself facing a beauty emergency, like needing a last-minute gift, or you're just out of your favorite mascara, again, don't panic. We got you. Order now and get $10 off on Sephora orders of $50 or more on the Uber Eats app. Order now. Offer ends October 30th. One order per customer. Additional terms apply. See app for availability. Delivery fees may apply.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Purina believes no one should have to make the impossible choice between their own safety and their pets. But nearly half of domestic abuse survivors delay leaving because they can't bring their pets with them. Through the Purple Leash Project, Purina is helping create more pet-friendly domestic violence shelters so survivors and their pets can escape and heal together. Visit Purina.com/purple to learn more.
That is uncharacteristically wise of you.
Yes, well, don't let it get around. I have a reputation.
We hear odd stories of Templars in the Imperium, Dorian.
All true.
I haven't even told you what I've heard.
Doesn't matter. All true. Particularly the part with the grapes and feathers.
Oh, I was leading towards that one, actually.
Please, go on. First Talon. What? Seeing if you've got the hang of your new title yet.
Right, me. First Talon.
If you join the Wardens, you could become the first Warden who's also First Talon.
The first Talon Warden.
Or First Talon First Warden.
Is that the first Talon who is a Warden, or the first Talon First Warden?
So many possibilities.
All right. Thank you all. Here's the middle of the show where we take time to thank our patrons. Thank you to all of our patrons who support us. If you'd like to support us, you can do so at patreon.com/DALorecast. Another great way to support us is to leave us ratings and reviews. We can do that on Apple or Spotify. If you leave us 5 stars and some kind words, we'll read it out on a future episode of the show. And so I have today a comment on our literature episode from Gabriella. And Gabriella says, I've been listening to the Cups for over a year now, and I'm so thankful I found you guys. I started listening when I was working a terrible job, and it got me through it. I learn more about my favorite games every time I listen. You're insightful, hilarious, and love for the games really shines through. Thanks for taking the time to make this podcast, and can't wait to listen to more. I'm so great that we can help you through a terrible job. I'm glad that we can bring some joy into that situation. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you for your support. Lastly, come hang out with us on Discord, where if you really disagree with what we said, you can hop in there and tell us all that you want to have, and all your reasons for why Carver is terrible. And just to come ready to have that song in Hamilton where they're like, here's an itemized list of 35 years of disagreements. Like, just be prepared for that. And so, but our Discord is a really great place. All joking aside, like, we have really civil conversations, and it's a good place to talk about the lore and to engage in thoughtful and provoking conversations about Dragon Age. Highly recommend it. And that's all I have for the middle of the show.
Well, let's get back into it.
This is an ad.
I hate
it! An ad for crisp, refreshing Angry Orchard hard cider.
That is refreshing.
An ad that interrupted your podcast.
I hate being interrupted!
To remind you to stop being angry at me and crack open an Angry Orchard.
That's a good idea.
Don't get angry! Get Orchard. Angry Orchard Cider Company, LLC. AngryOrchard.com. Please drink responsibly. Angry Orchard is a hard cider with other natural flavors.
All right, listen up, nacho chips. Quiet down, crispy potatoes. This is the moment Velveeta's been preparing you for, and you're not about to crack under pressure. Today's the day to go all in on the drip. Velveeta's Heat and Eat Queso is the MVP of any game day spread, so stick by them, and you'll be golden. Now get out there and make delicious history. No tailgate party is complete without Velveeta.
As a contractor, I don't pay for materials I don't use. So why would I pay for stuff I don't need in my mobile plan? That's why the new MyBiz plan from Verizon Business is so perfect. Now I can choose exactly what I want, and I only pay for what I need.
Right now, with MyBiz plan, get our best price, as low as $25 a line. Visit Verizon.com/business to get started today. New lines only. Price per month with 5+ lines. Includes auto pay and paper-free billing and promotional discount. Taxes, fees, economic adjustment charge. Applicable add-ons, prices, and terms apply. Guarantee applies to base monthly rate and stated discounts only. Add-on prices additional. Offers end September 30th, 2025.
This reminds me of a story.
Shocking.
It's about an impossibly handsome dwarf and his friend who got crowned King of the Nugs.
A Nug King, really?
It's not as good as it sounds. Nugs mostly just shit on the floor and roll in it. Welcome to the Deep Roads.
Is it me, or is this the slowest lift ever constructed?
It's better than climbing down.
I could do with some music. Something with a flute.
How about we skip this one? Send your man instead.
How about I shove a canary up your coal mine?
Oh, you fear barbarians will swoop down upon you.
Yes, swooping is bad.
Okay, so switching gears to if you take Carver with you during the Deep Roads expedition. So, like Bethany, if you take Carver with you, he gets the taint and can become a warden if you have Anders with you too. Otherwise, he'll die. And then he leaves you to go to the wardens, but will come back during the first battle of Kirkwall, where he appears passing through with either Stroud or Alistair. He has heard about the death of Leandra, but he can't join Hawke to save the city from the Qunari. They are there for other Grey Warden reasons. If you do another quest where you find Nathaniel Howe in the Deep Roads, which comes from Awakening, you will see Carver there as well, fighting Darkspawn. If you have friendship with him, he will thank you for helping. But if you have rivalry or even just like middle of the road, low friendship, he will get very upset with Hawke and will claim that you are sticking your nose into everything, which is when Nathaniel is basically just like, do you guys know each other? And you have to be like, yeah, that's my sibling, which is pretty humorous. But again, later, Carver is kidnapped by Grace and Thrask during the Kirkwall Rebellion. And so this is kind of the same in both situations. But ultimately, Carver is happier now than when you saw him last. He will thank Hawke for saving his life and basically like wants to help in this crisis with the mages and the Templars. And so if you ask him, like, how are you even going to be able to help since you're a Grey Warden and you're not supposed to interfere in like the politics of the world? Carver replies that Hawke saved his life and gave his life meaning by making him a Grey Warden, and that he won't thank his sibling by doing nothing while they start a war. And so ultimately, similar situation when you side with the Templars versus the Mages. If you side with the Templars, he expresses surprise that Hawke, who is a mage, is going to help Meredith annul the circle. There's not that fight that you can have with like, oh, are you going to fight me, because he's not a Templar in this situation. So that is everything with the Grey Wardens. I do feel like it's just a little bit more bland. There's not as much to discuss, in my opinion, than when he joins the Templars.
This may be a tease for the end, but I generally choose this route on the canon route, and I can explain why. Because Austin's already teased that he wants to talk about making Carver a Templar. The end.
Well, we can save that all for the end and just move right along into post Dragon Age 2, which, yes, there actually are quite a few situations in which he appears. So in the last court, which if you don't know what that is, it is a browser web game thing, and Carver is involved in it. When the Marquis of Seralt meets with either Carver or someone impersonating him, what happens specifically changes depending on what happens to him in Dragon Age 2. So if he dies, it's an imposter, and the Marquis will either agree to free him or imprison him. But then if Carver is a Templar or a Warden, the Marquis will cast him out or grant him hospitality. And I don't really think it has much bearing on what happens next in the game, but he does appear. And I know that Charles wanted to briefly mention Hard in Hightown, so I'm going to turn it over to him for a few minutes.
Yes, so this was something I wanted to bring to the group because it requires a little bit of extrapolation. It's not necessarily canonically confirmed, but in Hard in Hightown, firstly, I recommend, I'm about to spoil Hard in Hightown, so I highly recommend going and listening to the Cups episode on Hard in Hightown first, if you want to have this spoiled for you. But I am going to somewhat spoil the ending. In Hard in Hightown, the sort of green rookie partner, it starts out with this kind of training day setup, and it turns out that the more rookie partner, quote unquote, does turn out to be a more like the villain. It turns out to be the bad guy, the murderer. If you look at the art for this, the art clearly depicts somebody who looks a lot like Carver. And it's, yes, Shelby has the book up in front of her right now. Can you confirm for the microphone, does that not look like Carver Hawke?
Yeah, I mean, it's like,
left?
It's an identical likeness. Like, it's definitely supposed to be him. I did not put that together when we did our episode on this.
This character is portrayed, firstly, as like a rookie, is kind of bumbling, as he doesn't know what he's doing. And then he's like a gullible dupe who's working for like the big conspiracy. It's not a flattering character. So imagine you're Carver Hawke, right? You've been through a traumatizing experience. You have a year of dealing with blood magic and nobody giving you any respect. You finally start to be part of your brother's group of friends, none of whom like you, none of whom treat you with any degree of respect whatsoever. They are either dismissive of you or talk down to you or openly hostile to you. And the one of your brother or sister's friends who you kind of sort of get along with because you have the younger sibling thing going for you. The one turns around and writes one of the most famous books in all of Thedas, in which a character modeled on you is an idiot.
Yeah.
What?
I mean, and it's like, this is the most famous book in Thedas. Like, this is the most well-known, best-selling book in all of Thedas. And you, a veteran of the Battle of Ostagar, are painted to be an idiot who can barely stand up.
Imagine you're the villain of a Sarah J. Maas book, and everyone who knows you is going to know that you're a villain in a Sarah J. Maas book, but then there's hundreds of TikToks talking about how you specifically suck. Even though it's not mentioned anywhere that this character is based on you, but this character is very clearly based on you. And I think the larger reason that I bring this up is because it's probably one of the best examples outside of the companion dialogue of the way that all of the other characters, not just Hawke, are very dismissive of Carver.
Mm-hmm.
Very dismissive of who he is as a person. Really don't give him. A friend of mine I was talking to the other day about it described it as this like vicious feedback loop to where Carver is very hostile to the companions. And the companions respond by either patting him on the head and going, okay, shut up, little puppy, or get the fuck away from me.
Mm-hmm.
And that only just makes Carver be more hostile. So yeah, of course, by the end of the first year of dealing with these people, he's not going to want anything to do with them. He doesn't have the Anders and Fenris thing where they're sort of hostile to some of the companions, but then they like Hawke. It's very different. And I do think the Heart in Hightown, his portrayal, quote unquote, in Heart in Hightown, may be one of the better examples of how other people see him. Is this bumbling idiot that no one's taking seriously.
Right. And like anybody who knows you is going to know, like they're going to be able to put two and two together with the book. And that this is supposed to be you. Like once, they're just going to be able to figure it out. It's like Truman Capote with his works. Like they all figured out who he was talking about in that society. But just in the interest of time, I want to move us to Inquisition a little bit. So if he becomes a Templar, he is still in Kirkwall helping Aveline and the city guard keep the city in order. When the Templars start acting strange, Hawke asks Aveline to take him away to the Free Marches. If he became a warden, he was last seen near the border of the Anderfells, and again, Hawke asks Aveline to take him far away when the Orlesian wardens start acting strangely. So no matter what happens, where he ends up, if he's not dead, Aveline is sent to like make sure he's okay. And then lastly, there is a bottle of conscription ale with his name on it in Redcliffe Village behind a masterwork locked door. And I'm going to pretend Dragon Age the Veilguard doesn't exist, as we established on last week's episode.
Well, he's also not in it, which I do feel is a gross oversight.
Allegedly.
Well, we'll talk about that at the very end.
I do also want to point out that I did pull up his the codex entry on the bottle of conscription ale, and going back to talking about his military service and his need for community and his need to have a place that he belongs. I will point out that his conscription ale bottle is marked, quote, "Vintage Warden Carver Hawke toasts them all."
Yeah. So let's move into some more discussion for the last like 15-20 minutes of the episode. And so I want to start with some quotes. I've got several, but I have one that I really think sums up Carver. So I'm actually going to go in reverse order of the show notes. So a Grey Warden Carver will say, "The world is a big place, but the faces are the same. We do right here, and we make a difference." Templar Carver will say, "I'm a Templar, not a cleric. I'd prefer to stay in this world as long as possible. And if I can make it an ordered place without looking like a zealot, all the better." To Fenris, Carver will say, quote, "If you have a problem with my brother or my sister, you have a problem with me," which again goes to show like he does have care for his sibling. But the quote that I want to highlight the most, I feel like this is really the crux of his character and his arc. And it says, quote, this: "I don't know. It's like Mother taking everything out on us. She was just scared. I don't have a place in the life she's trying to bring back. I'm here if you need me, but I must find my own way," end quote. I think this speaks to so many things. I'm not going to get on my soapbox. I'm saying it now. I'm not going to get on my soapbox about Leandra because some of you have heard it before and that's
Get
a whole
on the
other
soapbox.
episode. And
Get on
it's
it.
just not, we don't have time for it today. But Leandra has mistreated both of her children, number one. And that I think affects all of them immensely. But they feel like, and Carver especially feels like, he doesn't have a place in his family. There's not room for him. They won't make room for him. One of the two. He feels that way. And he has to figure it out for himself. That is the crux of his character arc. His deepest desire is to make his own way in the world. And I find that to be a extremely natural inclination for somebody who's in their early 20s. Yes, he's annoying, but he is a young kid who wants to leave their family, wants to leave his big siblings' shadow and make a name for himself, not based on his sibling or his dad or his mom or anybody else that he knows. And I think that that's normal and understandable.
I think the key sentence that sticks out to me is, I don't have a place in the life she's trying to bring back. And I think specifically that word place, when I look at the character of Carver and his arc over the entirety of the story, assuming he doesn't die in the Deep Roads, which is entirely possible for him to do. But whether he goes Templar or Warden, both is an exploration of him trying to find that place and what it means to be a Templar or to be a Warden or to be where he is and how to make that space his own. And I do think that, yeah, Leandra never really knew what to do with him. The oldest child she knew what to do with. Let's treat them like an oldest child and we're going to try to marry them off.
Let's parentify them.
Let's do all of that. But like the kid, the kid brother, we don't really know what to do with him. Like if he's not soldiering anymore, what do we do with him? Because I also think I at least get the sense she doesn't know how to relate to him in the same way that she could relate to Bethany.
And I also think part of it is that he's not a mage. I think she expected all of her children to be mages. I think another part of it is a gender thing. Like, I think that she is a stereotypical boy mom who has parentified their oldest child. And I always play a female Hawke. So like, that's part of my take is she's parentified the oldest daughter and babied the youngest boy, but also ignored the boy, ignored his feelings and ignored his insecurities and pretended they don't exist. And it's just toxic.
I also like in the scene where you tell him about the Templar Carver. And like what Hawke says to him is not like, oh, mother and father cared about you. She says father cared to name you after a person he really respected, which is like Carver is longing for like his father's place. It's like he has already given up on like earning Leandra's affection.
That's sad.
Mm-hmm.
I am begging Dragon Age fans to do at least one DA2 run and bring Carver along on the Legacy DLC.
Mm-hmm.
Because he has a lot of resonance with the stuff you find out about Malcolm Hawke over that. And I think that one of the things that DA2 didn't have time to do that Legacy kind of fixes is that Malcolm Hawke doesn't haunt the narrative directly enough.
Mm-hmm.
That we really don't know a whole lot about the relationship between Malcolm and his children. And I think that is something that feels like it's missing from the Hawks story.
Yes, and it's not like he died when they were really young. He dies, like 3 years before Origins. So it's not like he's been dead for a decade. It would be natural for them to talk more about him. So I hear that for sure.
Hey, listeners, we ran into some technical difficulties with this episode, and so we are going to transition to Shelby's going to finish up some characteristics on Carver, and then we're each going to share why we love or hate this character. We apologize for the inconvenience. We just ran into some technical difficulties. I hope you enjoy the rest of the episode.
So a few things I wanted to talk about before we kind of get into my thoughts on Carver is his characteristics. And so I really feel like he is resentful and jealous and insecure. I think insecurity is kind of the most important personality trait that we see of him, because I think it really drives most of his motivations. But I also think Carver is a courageous person, albeit reluctantly, albeit quietly, but he also is stubborn and independent, and he wants to prove himself, and he wants to make a name for himself. And I don't think that that's unreasonable. And this kind of transitions into my thoughts on him, which is that I think that everything Carver does is completely understandable for a younger sibling who's been in the shadow of his older sibling for the entire time we've been in Kirkwall, if not his entire life. He wants to be independent. He wants to get out of Hawke's shadow. He's insecure once he's finally left it and feels like he's still in his sibling's shadow. And so I do have a lot of empathy for him in that regard. And I think that it's an extremely realistic portrayal of a younger sibling who is annoyed and affronted about their older sibling's success. And as an older sibling, you know, I can imagine that Hawke most likely, while they are annoyed, also probably feels a lot of guilt that Carver feels this way. And so I have a lot of empathy for him. I have a lot of empathy for most of the characters in Dragon Age 2, just because they're all so messed up. But Carver, I think, really gets an unfair take, I think, a lot of times.
For me, I tend to love Carver or not really hate Carver. I'm kind of indifferent towards it. I definitely see the frustrations with Carver and the frustrations with how he reacts to a Mage Hawke. And I definitely get the frustrations of watching him join the Templars. But the more I've learned about Carver in this episode and in my other playthroughs, I do feel for Carver. I am a younger sibling. I am a middle child. I understand, like, getting into the shadow of an older sibling, and I understand that really, really well. And at the same time, like, that's your family, and Carver needs to grow into his own. I mean, it's one of the reasons why I think that sending him to the Templars is such a good choice, because it's finally something that he chooses himself. And yeah, we can talk about the rightness of that choice. We can talk about whether or not that's a moral choice, but it is his choice. If he goes to the Wardens, like, he can make that his own choice, but that's still something that was thrust upon him. I think that with the revelation of his namesake and all of that, Carver joining the Templars is finally him making a choice and saying, I'm going to be my own person. But he does still have that kind of loyalty to family, and that he doesn't turn Hawke in. And I think that's why a Mage Hawke can get away with all of that, is because he has Carver and the Templars protecting him, basically saying, like, no, like, he's fine. Don't worry about him. He's not going to cause any problems. We can use him to help us hunt down these blood mages. And so I think Carver has an interesting dynamic. I don't like him as much as I do Bethany, but I definitely do not hate him as much as I did before that. And so I am really kind of moved from hate to kind of indifferent to a little bit of understanding with Carver.
I mentioned earlier in the episode that I usually always send Carver to the Wardens. And the reason that I always do that, the reason that I find the Wardens a more fulfilling character arc for Carver, is that the two things that he most wants as a character are a sense of community and a chance to be recognized for his own merits, for his own achievements. And he seemed to get that with the army at Ostagar. Everything we know about his time in King Kaelin's army, he very much had those things. He lost them. He continues to lose more over the course of the story. And that's sort of the ending where I find that he gets to reclaim those things. That while the Wardens are sort of outcasts in Thedosian society, they do have a very strong internal sense of community. We see that, everywhere from Alistair's dialogue in Dragon Age Origins, to The Calling, to Awakening, to anytime we get to actually be inside the Wardens as opposed to outside of them. But then the Wardens are also internally and externally recognized for their own merits. It's a place where your deeds can shine. And I think that that's something that really functions as a good sort of path for Carver for me. What I love about this character so much is so many different facets to him, which is amazing given he's really not in the game that much compared to others. I think Carver is a character for whom the relationship between him and the fandom is really indicative of the relationship between the other characters in the story and Carver himself. Carver is someone who, over the course of the story, because you're playing in the role of Hawke, can come off as very annoying, as very, brusque, as a jerk in a lot of ways. But when you stop to look at kind of what his motivations are and what he's actually saying and what's at the root of what he's saying to you as the player, there's a lot more depth and nuance there. That Carver is this young man who has just suffered a great deal of trauma. He's at an age where he needs to sort of find his place in the world. He found it, he lost it. He's now trying to find another place in the world. And he's having to do that in the shadow of his sibling, and he's having to do that in the shadow of his mother and all of this stuff that's happening in Kirkwall. And so when he is able to move out from under that, because I mentioned earlier in the episode too, basically nobody takes Carver seriously throughout the entirety of the first act. Everybody talks down to him, everybody makes fun of him. Varric probably writes a book in which Carver sucks, and then it becomes the best-selling book in all of Thedas. But once he's out from that shadow, we do see a lot more of his positive traits shine through, and we also do see him a lot happier, and depending on the path that you go with him as a character, you can potentially see him with a much healthier relationship with his sibling. And I think he has a lot of potential for growth as well over the course of the story, which is really interesting. I wish we would have gotten that Exalted March DLC, because I would have been really interested to see where he went, especially if he went the Templar route and right after he betrayed Knight Commander Meredith to side again with Hawke. But I love the character. I think he's great. I am a Carver Hawke defender, and I have made my points over the course of this episode. Additionally, my crack ship is Carver and Fenris. I have yet to find good fic, although I haven't looked that much. So if you happen to know any Join the Cups podcasting and more Discord, and send those to me, I'm at CW Rogers 6 on that. So, pluggables. Normally, for the patron chats, I do a condensed version of my pluggables, but everyone's trapped with me, so you get to learn about all the things that I do with my time. I am, as mentioned before, in the Cups Podcasting and More Discord as at CW Rogers 6. I have two podcasts of my own. I am both Star Wars podcasts. I have a Star Wars TV podcast analysis. I was a screenwriting major, and my buddy Bradley was a producing major. And so every week we take a Star Wars TV show and we go through it and we deep dive into it and deep dive into the lore and the production and the writing and all of that. That's called Gold Squadron Gaze. If you love TTRPGs, I'm also on a show called For Light and Dice. That is a Star Wars 5e TTRPG podcast set in the High Republic era. We're about to wrap up our season 2. So now is a great time to jump into that. The story is really kicking off. It's an all-queer cast playing all-queer characters. It's a fantastic time. I was also just involved in a Star Wars EU convention. That was called Legacy Expo. So if you're an old school Star Wars EU fan and you wanted to see some of the really cool things that the team is doing, or you want to see the panels from that or whatever, you can look at the various Legacy Expo socials. Just go to legacyexpo.org, and that'll link you to all of the various socials. I am also a self-published author. I have been writing a crime serial for a number of years now. That is a gay thriller series that is set in an adult film studio. That is called Beach House Studios. It's available on Amazon, Kobo, Barnes & Noble, and you can request it through your library, through Overdrive. They can get it for really, really, really cheap. I really appreciate the Cups inviting me on. I love Carver. I almost never get to talk about how much I love Carver. I am mostly just defending him. So I'm really grateful to them for the opportunity to come on here. This has been an absolutely fantastic experience. Thank you to Teacup and Shecup for having me on here. This has been absolutely incredible.
Well, a special thank you to Charles for coming onto this show and talking about Carver with us. Thank you to Shelby for getting the research together and for leading this discussion. And thank you all for listening to the Dragon Age Lorecast. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Dragon Age Lorecast. You can find us on Twitter at DA Lorecast.
If you have any lore questions, topics to unpack, or side character suggestions, join our Cups Podcasting and More Discord server. It's easily the best place on the internet. You can also support us financially through our Patreon. You can find us there on patreon.com/DragonAgeLorecast.
The Dragon Age Lorecast is part of the Robots Radio Network. For more information about the Robots Radio Network, join the Discord server via the link in our episode description.
If you enjoyed the show or learned something new today, please subscribe, leave us a review, and join the Patreon. And if you enjoyed our intro and outro music, give a big thank you to Pipeman Studios. Thank you, Pipeman. Thanks again for listening to the Dragon Age Lorecast. We'll see you next time.
Do you love Dragon Age? Have you always wanted to learn more about its vast world and detailed lore? Are you still attached to your hero of Ferelden, even a decade after Dragon Age Origins came out? Or maybe you're a newer fan, still discovering a new tidbit or quest every day.
Well, either way, the Dragon Age Lorecast is the podcast for you. I'm Austin, also known as Teacup.
And I'm Shelby, also known as Shecup.
And come and join us as we embark on a journey to explore and discover all things Dragon Age.
We'll discuss all kinds of topics, from Lyrium to the Chantry and the great mysteries of the old gods, and even more that even you BioWare superfans might not know about.
So come and listen on Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcast. And always remember, swooping